Anderson Cooper, AC 360, CNN weeknights 10 Eastern.
The fact that the last combat brigade has indeed left Iraq does not necessarily mean that all U.S. troops are going to be out anytime soon. Where do we actually stand with U.S. forces in Iraq?
Try to make some sense of this, John. That was the last combat convoy that left. There's still a couple hundred members of that Stryker brigade who stayed behind to work on some logistical missions that they still had to wrap up. They're probably not going to fly out of Iraq until late Thursday. There's also another 6,000 U.S. troops who are supposed to be out of Iraq by the end of the month. Now, they're not necessarily designated as combat units, but a Pentagon spokesman says they could still conduct combat operations if they needed to, and that the combat mission itself does not end until that handover at the end of the month. And then, of course, you have the 50,000 troops who will remain after September through the end of next year.
Right, so they'll be there through 2011. Ambassador Crocker, have we accomplished everything we set out to do in Iraq? We thought that Iraq would be a productive member of the global community far before now.
I think that kind of expectation is quite unrealistic. Iraq has made substantial progress. When I arrived in early 2007, it was nothing short of a nightmare. Where they are today is far beyond that. They've got a long way to go. It's going to take a lot of time, and will take sustained U.S. presence and commitment, as I think the Obama administration has made clear they're ready to provide.
Okay, well, what really, Ambassador Crocker, is there left to do in Iraq? How far are we from seeing Iraq being a successful country?
Well, Iraq is still at the beginning of the story of its evolution since 2003. As tired of it as many Americans may be, this process is still just at its beginning. You need only look at our own history as a republic to get some sense of how hard these things are. It took us 13 years to get a constitution. After the Declaration of Independence, that papered over some pretty substantial divides that nearly ripped the country apart 8 decades later. So the process of state and society building is going to be a long one. The Iraqis are facing many of the issues we faced. In some respects, I think they're tracking pretty well, but this is going to be a process that takes years and years.
Mr. Ambassador, stay with us on the telephone, if you would. David Gergen, let's go to you. A question that many people are asking now as this war begins to wind down is, was it all worth it?
Most Americans think it was not, but I think we're far better off than we were, say, 3 or 4 years ago before Chet Crocker went there and we got a new strategy, we got the surge. I think this is a milestone tonight, and that, John, a lot of military families and their parents are extremely pleased that we're not sending more troops there to fight. And I think the president deserves, a salute for saying, we're going to get out of there, and he's now done that. But there's no doubt that we have not accomplished, and nobody knows whether we will accomplish what we set out to do. We're certainly not leaving behind a democratic country. In fact, we're leaving behind a country that doesn't have a government. We're leaving behind a country where there's a lack of electricity is still very troublesome, burdensome, lack of other public services. And the big question now, John, is the amount of violence is increasing. We've seen some pretty violent acts here
at least 48 people
days.
killed in Baghdad yesterday.
Yeah, just yesterday in Baghdad, 48 people killed. Are we returning to the cycles of violence we saw before? I don't know that. Chet Crocker would be far better qualified to answer that. But there's no question we're going to have to leave a large footprint behind, and this is not going away for us as an issue. In fact, I think a lot of Americans are asking tonight, are both of our efforts in Iraq and Afghanistan not turning out as we had hoped?